My stepmother brought a snake into our house. A story by Ebi's Heart. Moyo's phone rang for the third time before she picked it up and sluggishly asked, "What is it, Kai?" "I am trying to get some rest." Kai sighed on the phone and quickly said, "Your husband has paid her dowry. Don't say I was the one who told you," and hung up. Moyo felt she didn't understand what her mother-in-law's house help just said and called her back. "Hello, Kai, what did you say?" "Please let's talk later," Kai said and hung up again. Moyo quietly sat up and called her husband, but he didn't pick his phone. She decided to wait and see if what she just heard was true. Her husband has been a big cheat, and everyone including her in-laws have always encouraged Moyo to pray for him. You know men are easily moved by what they see, so always forgive your husband. You cannot leave your home after 15 years for another woman. This was Johnson's mother's speech the last time Moyo and Johnson had a big fight over his infidelity. Johnson was Moyo's university sweetheart. They got married while in their final year because Moyo got pregnant. They were blessed with 4 girls and a boy, and the boy had special needs. Since then, it has been one cheating scandal to another. So Moyo, upon hearing something like this from her mother-in-law's house help, became scared. She imagined a lot of things. "I just pray it is not true. I have endured too much in this marriage to lose now," Moyo thought to herself. She called Johnson for 2 days straight, but got no response. Their children were already used to not having their father around, so they didn't bother to ask about him. 1 week later, on a Sunday afternoon, Johnson returned home with his new wife Sonia. They both walked into the sitting room holding hands and laughing. When Moyo heard her husband's voice, she quickly walked to the parlor and saw a very beautiful light-skinned young woman. She was about to ask who she was when Johnson blurted out, "Meet Sonia, my new wife." The kids ran to the sitting room to know what was happening when they heard their mother scream, "Mommy, what is it? And who is she?" Their first daughter Jessica asked. "She is your stepmother," their father replied. "Why? Why are you always making Mommy sad?" Jessica asked, but her father shut her mouth with a slap. She ran to her room crying. Johnson took Sonia to the guest room, not minding how hurt his wife and kids were. "Make yourself comfortable, my love," he whispered in Sonia's ears and left. "Mama, Johnson have done the worst. How could he bring another woman into our home? He humiliated me too much this time around, and I will not let this slide. You and Papa should talk to him now before I do something we will all regret." Moyo was still ranting on the phone to her mother-in-law when she cut her short. "Shut your mouth, Moyo, you talk too much. Who are you to tell my son what to do in his house?" Moyo was so shocked at her mother-in-law's response that she started crying. "Look, Moyo, my son needs an heir, and your imbecile son cannot be an heir to his businesses, or could he? We all advised you to try for another baby, but your reply was that your doctor said this, and that. You have just 5 children and you think they are too much. Oh please, allow my son be." Johnson's mother hissed hard on the phone and hung up. Moyo cried hard for a long time. She wished her parents were alive. She wished her sibling were well-to-do. She was from a very humble background. In fact, she was the only person in her family who can boast of a good roof over her head. Being the first child, she was the only person her parents could put in the university before their death. She was in her first year in the university when her both parents died in a fire accident. Their death affected her so much. She was about to drop out in her second year when she met Johnson. Johnson and his family took care of her education until she graduated. Her plan was to get a job after school and train her younger ones. But getting married and giving birth before graduating from the university made it almost impossible for her to get any job after school. So she joined her husband Johnson in his business. Since then, her husband's family have never stopped reminding her of how they made her. "Jessica, listen, you and your sisters have to accept her." Moyo was advising and consoling her children, who were so hurt by their father's betrayal. "We have nowhere else to go, so we have to make this home peaceful for us." Moyo hugged her children and wept. Sonia was a high-class chick, the type that never wear a cloth twice. She was always shopping for clothes or wigs. The only time she was at home was when Johnson gets back or when she had guests to entertain. Her room was off limits. No one goes into her room without her permission. She employed 2 house helps to serve her. While one was in charge of her food, the other one was in charge of cleaning her space and her laundry. One day, Sonia had visitors and they were in the parlor talking and laughing in loud voice, when Chucks, Moyo's special needs son, walked into the parlor drooling spit all over him. He went straight to the drinks Sonia kept by the stool for her guest and tried to drink them. This infuriated Sonia and she slapped Chucks so hard that he fell on the ground making an odd sound. "Get him out of here," Sonia barked. Her house help took Chucks away. But Sonia was still not satisfied, so he called Johnson on the phone crying. Johnson got home instantly, but what he did shocked Sonia. He slapped Sonia so hard for hitting his son. "How could you touch him? Don't you see he is sick?" Johnson shouted enraged. This happened in front of Sonia's friends. Sonia angrily left the house with her friends. She drove to a quiet place and parked her car. "This is not happening," Sonia shouted on top of her voice. "How could Johnson think he can lay his hands on me? Does he think I am his docile wife? Does he know how many men I have killed? I have been in the streets for too long to be treated this way. I will teach him a strong lesson," Sonia threatened. Her friends encouraged her to act fast. The next day, Sonia traveled. She traveled without telling Johnson. One thing Johnson never knew was that Sonia used to be a high-class runs babe. She had dined and wined with both the living and the dead. She only needed a rich man's home to retire, and giving birth was never in her diary. Even though the main reason why Johnson married her was so she could give him a son, but another reason was that he needed a flashy younger woman that he would be taking to functions, since he was now a wealthy man. "Barbara, I want to take over this man's common sense completely. I want to have everything. I want him to lick my feet and tremble at my voice." Sonia made a long request to her personal witch doctor. "That man is very powerful, so controlling him comes with a price," Barbara said to Sonia. "I am a tough woman. There is no price too much for my comfort," Sonia boasted. The barber reached for a very fancy handbag and gave her. "Just keep this among your things in the room. When it's night time, say your wishes to it and watch the wonders it will perform." "Where have you been, baby?" Johnson said, hugging Sonia. "I am sorry for being thoughtless earlier." Johnson apologized over and again to Sonia, who didn't even utter a word. She simply went into her room and kept the empty designer bag she came home with. Later that night, Sonia woke up, brought the bag out and said, "I want to take over completely. My words should be law in this house, and anyone who dares me shall die." Immediately she finished her decree. A very big invincible python crawled out of the bag, climbed Sonia's shoulder and took control of her. Sonia, with the snake on her neck, walked out of her room and was walking about the whole house, room to room until daybreak. She even went into the kitchen and the snake was licking the soup and stew Moyo left in her pot. But the scary thing was that Sonia was also sleeping on the bed with Johnson. So the snake controls Sonia's spirit. She would be on the bed while her spirit patrols with the snake within the house. Sonia would be seeing a dream where she was playing with a snake. The next day, Johnson woke up and rushed to make breakfast for Sonia. His wife and children were so surprised to see him in the kitchen, but he didn't care. He took the food to Sonia, who asked him to sit down and wait for her to eat. "Send Chucks to your parents. I don't ever want to see him. He irritates me." This was the first demand Sonia made. Johnson, without asking questions, answered yes, baby. He rushed to Chuck's room and started packing his things. "What are you doing?" Moyo asked Johnson, who was hurriedly stuffing her son's things into a bag. "Sending Chucks away. I would have done this before bringing my new wife here. Chucks is irritating, you know that. He will stay with my parents for now." Moyo, who had been keeping quiet, flared up, vibrating with anger. "I will never allow you to treat my children anyhow. I have been quiet about you and your new wife, but stay away from my children with your madness." All Moyo's cry and rant didn't deter Johnson from doing what he wanted to do. He bundled Chucks, who was crying, into his car and drove off. Moyo followed him with her own car. When they got to Johnson's parents, his mother supported Johnson and accepted to look after Chucks. Moyo cried and tried to take her child back, but they were stronger. Johnson's mother threatened Moyo to behave and allow her husband to take decisions as head of the home or move out of her son's house. "And when you are leaving, you will not take my granddaughters with you." Moyo cried home. She knew her mother-in-law to be wicked, but this was too much. She wondered what she had ever done to deserve such treatment. When she got home, she met her daughters outside crying. "Sonia sent us outside, she said we were disturbing her," her first daughter Jessica said, crying. Moyo and her children were able to get into their home in the morning because Sonia refused to let them in. The war in Johnson's family continued growing. Every day, there was a new problem, but when Sonia finally took control of everything spiritually, everywhere became peaceful. No one dared counter her on anything, except Jessica. Then one day, Jessica got bitten by a snake right inside her room. The snake was never found. She saw the snake when it bit her, but they couldn't find the snake to kill. Jessica's death almost woke Johnson up from his bondage, but it didn't. His mother visited, but Sonia's charm affects anyone that steps foot into their home, including in-laws, friends, and associates. Once you set your foot there, you will lose your self-will. It even started affecting Moyo, because she started kneeling to greet Sonia, and she seemed not be aware that her daughter Jessica was dead. Sonia enjoyed her reign and supremacy, until her charm started backfiring. It started affecting Johnson's businesses. His company went up in flames, and everything in his warehouse worth billions burnt down. He did not even feel it. He would smile and tell people that so far as Sonia was in his life, he will always be happy and would never feel any pain. Their families were all gagged spiritually and no one could talk. However, money was no longer coming to Sonia as it used to, because Johnson's business had crippled. Even though Johnson hustles hard to make her happy, but it just wasn't like before. So she started lashing out constantly. She would beat Johnson and even slap Moyo. But none of them could challenge her, because they don't even know what they were doing. Gradually Sonia started feeling the snake crawling on her body even while awake. Before now, it was only in her dream, but it had started affecting her physically. She will look in the mirror and see a snake hanging on her neck. She would shout in fear. "What is happening to me? Why am I seeing snake all around me?" she asked herself. One thing the barber never told her was that a snake comes out of the designer's bag that he gave to her. She thought it was just a mysterious bag. Things have become so tough for Johnson that he now relied on friends to survive. Everyone was too blind to even notice that Sonia never got pregnant or gave birth. They could hardly mention her name, because everyone was scared of her. But Sonia was drowning in her own fears too. She would just sit and be feeling something cold crawling around her neck. So she visited Barber again. "I don't want to marry Johnson again, so here is the bag," Sonia said while dropping the fancy bag Barber gave her. The barber laughed and said, "There is no going back on this charm. You can leave Johnson if you wish, but the effect of the charm will never leave you or Johnson for life." Sonia's attempt to convince Barber that she doesn't want again infuriated Barber and he sent her away, causing at her. Sonia left feeling a bit relieved that she had at least left the evil bag that the barber was using to destroy her life at the barber's place, only to get home and saw the bag amongst her things. She started living in serious fear. She would hear a snake hissing close to her face but wouldn't see any snake. "What is happening to me? What did Barber do to me?" Sonia decided to hang out with her friends and probably tell them what she was going through. But she couldn't sit through the outing, as she could feel snake hissing angrily and crawling all over her body. She ran away from the restaurant, leaving her friends wondering if she was okay. She ran home to burn the bag, but when she opened her wardrobe, what she saw made her to scream. She saw a big snake curled up in her wardrobe hissing aggressively. She screamed, "Snake, snake." Her house helps ran to her, but none of them saw the snake, except Sonia. She quickly packed her things and left Johnson's house. Johnson was on his knees pleading for her to stay, but she was practically running. Even Moyo was pleading with her to stay. When she left, The scale fell off Johnson's eyes. He drove to his company, but found ruins. What happened to my company? He called his manager. The manager called his family and everyone was surprised. Few hours later, everyone gathered at Johnson's house to know what was happening. They had to start explaining to Johnson afresh that his company was gone. Moyo was also asking after their daughter Jessica. It now dawned on everyone that they don't even know what had been going on in their lives. Moyo packed and left with her surviving children upon realizing what she had lost and that the comfortable life she was clinging onto was gone. Johnson blamed his mother for not calling him to order. Yes, I married Sonia to birth me another son, but when you discovered that things were not going as I wanted, no pregnancy, no son. Why did you not advise me to kick her out? Johnson shouted at his family. But unfortunately, everyone was affected. His mother practically forgot he had a son like Johnson during this period. Moyo's family was also remembering things in bits. Eventually, everyone blamed Johnson, including his parents, for being too loose. Johnson, after some months of drowning in alcohol, decided to man up and reconcile his family. He went back to his business and decided to pick up the pieces of his life and start afresh. Meanwhile, Sonia was now living in a house filled with python. She has reparked several times. Anywhere she goes to, snakes followed her around. She was now looking like a crazy person, always trying to explain things to people. Things they were not seeing.
Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.